I moved into a very isolated cabin somewhere in the woods. I just wanted to be away from the city, from all its monotony that made me lose interest in everything that place had to offer. Switching places from a beat-up one-bedroom apartment to a small cabin in the woods seemed to be everything I have ever wished for. The clean, fresh air that slowly crept up in my room every morning when I'd open the windows made me think that it was the right choice. The chirping of crickets at night and the sound the ice cubes made when I drank some good old whiskey were music to my ears. One cigar from now and then always helped me to better focus in the silent evenings. The woods were located at the edge of a very small, rural town with a population of approximately 300 people. I was going there maybe once a week for groceries at first. That way, I slowly got to know almost every person who lived there. One day, I got to meet a man by the name of James Greenwood. Word in town had it that he was the former CEO of a multi-million real estate company. When his business went bankrupt a few years back, James fell off the wagon and into a never-ending spiral of accumulating debt through gambling and wasting money away on alcohol. He ended up going insane too. He always talked gibberish that no one seemed to ever understand. He lived from the mercy of the community. Everyone always contributed to his well-being, and they helped him in every way they could. Money, food, and a room to stay for free at the local inn. I wanted to do the same after a few weeks of constantly seeing him at the bar. He always paid back the people who'd help him by doing chores for them. So I wanted to pay him to bring my weekly groceries to the cabin. That way, I could have been even more isolated without having to go in town regularly. James was always sober during the day. After he'd finished doing all his work, he'd head at the inn, get smashed in under an hour, and then hit the hay. The rather odd thing is that the people in town always talked nicely and they were polite, but it was just that. I never felt a strong connection to any of them. I tried talking more to some, but they always ended the talk abruptly. The best conversations I had were with James. Sometimes he'd stay for a few minutes more after bringing me the groceries. One day, I found a note from him inside one of the bags. It read, "Sir, these people are not what they seem. The entire town is cursed. There is something terrible coming tonight, a storm. If what's inside it comes out, it's already too late. You need to leave immediately." James, lay off the booze, man. I remember telling myself while pouring a glass of whiskey. I thought it was ironic and funny at the same time. Or maybe not so funny. Another odd thing that I realized after reading that note was that there weren't any communication means to the outside world. I never saw anyone with a laptop, cell phone, tablet, or any smart device. Also, I never even seen a TV at the inn or the local market. All these people lived in a self-made bubble inside that small town. These things started to feel very wrong all of a sudden. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Okay, yeah, I wanted to be isolated, but I didn't want to live like a caveman, you know? I didn't want to be away from the rest of civilization and not know what was happening around me. That same evening, all hell broke loose. I remember the sky going dark all of a sudden. Black clouds were gathering at an enormous speed. They morphed and changed in size and just settled above the small town. I got back inside the cabin thinking it will be a very bad storm. I made sure all the windows were securely shut. The obvious question came to mind. How did James know about the coming storm? There wasn't any way to know about it. I found out I only had phone reception if I stayed still near the kitchen window. It was very unpredictable, though. So I took it out of my pocket and saw it had one bar. I immediately typed in the name of the town and the weather forecast. It said that indeed there was a storm coming. So how did James know about it? That was my burning question. At that exact moment, a sense of unease crept up my spine. This wasn't a normal thing. The way those clouds moved high up in the sky made me cringe. Their dark shapes looked like they were an apostle for the end of the world. The hair on my arms suddenly rose, and dread was slowly building up inside the house. The wind started howling. Its shrieks of pain floated in the air and smashed into the outside walls. There was a loud banging on my front door. It kept on repeating. Someone or something was on the other side smashing fists against the wooden door. I heard James' voice. He practically begged me to open it. I did so, and he just burst inside, panting. "Michael, I knew you wouldn't leave. I knew you wouldn't listen. Now we have to brave this storm together. You and I, the drunk and the fool," he said, almost out of breath. I could see a deep, unending fear nesting inside his eyes. My heart started drumming inside my chest as if it wanted to create so much pressure against the ribcage for an untimely escape. James told me he'd infiltrated in this town a few years back. People didn't know it, but the town was cursed, and with it, so were them. First of all, James told me that him playing the town drunkard was a mere act. He had precise orders to gain everyone's trust and stay as low as possible. Some of the townfolk were holding secret meetings in anticipation of the storm. He was part of a secret order that tried to stop all evil beings who tried to destroy humankind by any means necessary. Secondly, and this is why the storm was important in the whole equation, was that the curse that had been put on the town was the making of a long-forgotten diabolical god. That god lived in storms. The bigger the storm, the stronger he'd get. He also told me that you can only see the effect it has on people only when there's a storm. You could see with your own eyes how the curse acts, and you could see the face of that god in the storm only if you watch closely. Fear took over me, and I suddenly knew this was the truth, and nothing but the truth. All those red flags were clear warnings. It was impossible for me to see them at first. Now, though, everything seemed clearer. Our talk was cut short by the wind that started beating ever so violently outside. The whooshes and rustling of leaves sounded like screams of agony. James peeked outside. Black hail started coming down from the gloomy sky. Each pellet was rhythmically hitting the roof of my cabin as a reminder that the end was drawing nearer. He said we needed to get in the car and leave this town right away. The only really bad thing, though, was that we had to pass through it. James warned me that we will see horrible things and the storm might claim both of our lives. I thought that if there was even the slightest chance of escaping this, I'd take it in a heartbeat. I got in the car and drove off into town. To my surprise, it had changed. The houses and buildings looked deserted. They were decrepit and old. It seemed like no one had lived there in ages. Passing by them, I saw the doors opening. People came out, and they looked different. A cloud of dark smoke was enveloping them. Their eyes were just hollow sockets. Smoke filled them too, and it looked like a small, dark fire in them. The fear that was slowly building up inside my body was a sign that everything would go sideways if I lost another second in that cursed town. When I got my eyes back on the road, though, a man was standing in the middle of it. I swerved past him and almost lost control of the car. The storm was growing bigger now. It seemed absolutely evil. The darkened clouds were filled with an ancient and terrible curse meant to bring the world to its knees. Then, for just a fraction of a second, everything went silent and I heard someone crying. It was a little boy standing on a front porch. He was different from the rest of the people. His body was enveloped in a powerful radiant halo, and the eyes were as golden as the sun. I immediately drove to the house. "Hey there, little fella. Hush now, everything's going to be all right. Are your mom and dad inside the house? Are they okay?" I asked, while trying to calm him down. "I don't know how I got here, mister. This is not where I live. A few moments ago, I was playing with my friends, and now I'm here. Please take me home. I'm scared, the boy said, sniffling. I assured him we'll get him back to his family, no matter where they were. He'd be with them safe and sound. I put him in the back, and before going back to the car, James grabbed my shoulder. This wasn't supposed to happen. I don't know how or why this kid got here, but I heard about his kind. There are kids across the country who develop teleporting abilities. As soon as we leave town, I'll need to make a few phone calls, he told me. I felt like a new layer of fear was being added into my heart. This whole thing was impossible for me to believe a few days back. Evil gods that live in the sky, kids with superpowers. These things made me ask myself what else was out there. James told me that the boy needed to be taken to his home as soon as possible. If the government found out about him, it would be no good. He assured me that he'll take him to his order, and from then, he will immediately be taken back home. Right before going back inside the car, we heard a cacophony of growls right behind us. Some of those people were slowly coming towards us. They looked like they were guided, like they were controlled by something or someone. I looked up into the sky, and one of the clouds changed its shape to a face. Its eyes started blinking, its evil grin revealing a set of razor-like teeth. Then another cloud changed to the same face. Then another and another. The whole sky was filled with millions of those evil grinning faces. Then they all looked at us, and a cacophony of high-pitched screams pierced our ears. I felt a warm liquid coming out of them. I knew they were bleeding red. At the moment, the faces in the storm screamed. Those smoke people started running towards us. James got in the car in time, but I wasn't able to. One of them grabbed me by the throat and started choking me. The rest of them soon followed. The kid was looking from the car. He was screaming at the creature to leave me alone. Meanwhile, the screams in the sky continued. Sometimes they stopped, giving way to evil laughs. I almost blacked out. I glanced at the kid and saw that he was just a shape made of light now. "Leave him alone!" he yelled from the back seat. At that exact moment, the smoke people vanished. It was like they weren't even there in the first place. The overcast sky soon became clear, and it gave way to a big moon that almost seemed relieved by the fact we escaped alive from this battle. I got back in my car. Still coughing, I looked in the rear view to see the hand marks on my throat. It was a close call. I turned around and looked at the kid. "You are really special, kiddo. I owe you my life. Thank you." "No problem, mister. Those things were so mean to you. You saved me in the first place," he replied. I nodded and smiled back at him. We left that godforsaken town right away. I asked myself where those people go, and my burning question was, where did that god go? The kid fell asleep on the way back to my city home. James asked me to borrow the car, and he'll have someone get it back as soon as the kid was safe. I happily obliged. A few days later, I got my car back. The little guy called and told me he's back with his family. He was all right, just like I promised. There was a storm that night. I was glad it didn't catch me outside on the streets. I looked at the sky as the clouds were gathering, and the wind moved them around as it wanted. For a moment, I thought I saw something in the